As I mentioned during the announcements this morning, next week our candidate for ordination and previous youth director, Ben Drew, will be joining us for worship on his way back to seminary as he'll be preaching on the 10th and final commandment as we end the summer series. Which also means today is probably the last time for a long time you'll hear me preach on one of the 10 commandments. It's okay to look sad. But you don't have to fake it. Hey, don't clap now. Because today we're talking about lying. Now, have you ever asked or been asked this dreaded question? How do I look in these pants? Do they make me look bigger than I wished I did? Maybe you've heard it phrased a little differently than that. But no matter how it's phrased, it always feels like a trap, doesn't it? Yet today we're talking about the 9th word or the 9th commandment. You shall not give false testimony or false witness against your neighbor. Do you think that counts towards what we're talking about today when asked, how do they look in these pants? Let's find out. This commandment to not bear false witness is actually a very specific, perhaps the most specific commandment that we have, at least until we get to next week. It's very specific in that it sets it in a legal context. And it makes it clear right out of the gate that this commandment is about justice, and it's societal justice. And it testifies that justice itself is a critical part, an indispensable part of a God-centered community. And the foundation of how that justice is achieved, where God is choosing to start with it, it's very strict and it's very specific. Some translations use the word testimony here instead of witness. And while they are similar, they are different. False witness has a much higher bar. False testimony is when you just knowingly lie. Let's say hypothetically that I broke someone's vase. I know I broke the vase, but I'm going to lie and say someone else did it. False witness is different in that it can be saying that I think is true or is probably right, but I didn't witness it, I can't prove it. Let's keep the vase as an example. The same poor vase is broken again. I see someone walk into the room with the vase, I'm in a different room. I hear a crash and a scream. I walk in. I see the broken vase and the person standing over it. So I call the owner of the vase and say, so-and-so just broke your vase. Could they have broken the vase? Yeah, they could have. Could something else have happened to the vase? It's possible. But what I did is I took what I thought to be true, or perhaps what I wanted to be true, and started telling people that it was true, even though I was not there to witness it. If you've ever seen any Law and Order or like procedural drama, courtroom type TV shows, we have all heard something be said in court and then a lawyer says, objection, hearsay. Hearsay is actually a type of this false witness. We're repeating something that we heard someone say about what happened, but we didn't personally actually witness the vase get broken. Now, if we're looking at this in context of the other 10 commandments that we've heard so far, we might say this one is really odd. It's way too specific. It's too detailed. How does this one fit in with what God is trying to do with the 10 commandments? And if we look at how it actually affects this as the start of them defining their justice system, it makes achieving justice, or at least finding someone guilty, way more difficult. And it's set that way on purpose. This is along the same lines as innocent until proven guilty. But we know in the court of public opinion, which is now run through social media, and then the cable news reports on what's happening in social media, it usually turns out that if we don't like you, you're guilty. And if we do like you, you're innocent. Who cares what the facts say? But what this is doing, whether it's innocent until proven guilty or not allowing false witness, it's setting the standards for convicting someone of a crime really high. Because you got to have that direct witness to prove it. Which means that sometimes people who are guilty go free. It also means you have less people who are innocent get charged as being guilty. It's actually a form of grace. Scripture goes into more detail on ways to protect those without the knowledge or finances to navigate a legal system in Exodus 23 and Deuteronomy 24 and 25. I'm not going to read 2 chapters of Deuteronomy to you, but I will read a couple verses from Exodus 23, just a few verses after this. This is building on this commandment. You shall not spread a false report. You shall not join hands with the wicked to act as a malicious witness. You shall not follow a majority in wrongdoing. When you come upon your enemy's ox or donkey going astray, you shall bring it back. When you see the donkey of one who hates you struggling under its burden, and you would hold back from setting it free, you must help set it free. You shall not pervert the justice due to your poor in their lawsuits. You shall take no bribe, for a bribe blinds officials and subverts the cause of those who are in the right. You shall not oppress a resident alien. You know the heart of an alien, for you were aliens in the land of Egypt. There was a lot there. 2 commandments specifically about donkeys. But the question of justice, how do we establish and maintain justice, is an important one for a community. And this is a community that was just starting out receiving these commandments in the desert. And the question of how to keep justice equal among people with different knowledge, different resources, different connections is an important topic. As a country, in the United States, we have the 5th and the 14th Amendment, the right to due process, the right to justice in a legal system, and this has been historically interpreted to apply to all people, not just United States citizens. We have in Exodus explicit instructions not to treat resident aliens or foreigners worse, and imploring the people to remember that they too were foreigners. The second group of people specifically lifted up in Exodus 23 is people who are poor, who could not afford or have the connections to have better representation. But we know today, as it has been throughout history, that all aspects of justice aren't equal. If they were, we wouldn't have needed the 5th and the 14th Amendment in the first place, right? The bigger picture this commandment speaks to is the damage that falsehoods can have on a justice system and on a society. And it uses the legal system, the purveyor of justice, as one of the foundations for a just society. The 10 Commandments, it's important to remember, were given to the people as a starting point, not the finish line. These are just starting the different cornerstones, the foundation of building a community. And we have to build on it. For this to have any relevance to us today at all, we have to build on it, because I am guessing that most of us are not regularly called into the courtroom to be a witness in legal proceedings. Is that a fair assumption? No one's planning to do that Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday of this week, right? Because if that was all it was, and even then, if we broke the commandment in a courtroom, the other lawyer hopefully says, objection, hearsay, and then our testimony gets thrown out, and what's the harm? So the question is, how do we use this commandment as a starting point, something to build on, where we personally, whether it's as part of PCWS or as the bigger church or just individually, how do we use this to work towards a more just society? Let's imagine together for a moment, can we? Let's imagine if there could ever be a situation in our lives, just possibly, where we might hear a story about someone doing something, probably something that they shouldn't be doing, maybe something we disapprove of. And even though it may not really be our business, we hear that story and then we go and share it with someone else. Is there ever a scenario in our world where that happens? That happens, right? Theoretically, it could happen over the phone or over coffee or on social media or in the parking lot or pretty much any place where we have another person or the internet. So anywhere. And if we took this word, this commandment, and we started with the legal lens, but building on it, taking it, the lesson to our day-to-day life, the guidance actually becomes pretty simple. You shall not gossip. And with that adjustment, a super easy to follow commandment for most of us, do not bear false witness in a court of law. Super easy, I'm rarely in court. Becomes really hard because we have the opportunity to gossip all the time, everywhere. And most of our false witness or our gossip today happens on our phones. How many times have we seen a story on social media and felt that surge of outrage or validation, negative or positive, and we want to hit share or comment without us taking the time to verify? Because if we verified everything we saw on social media, would we have time to do anything else ever? It's human nature. It's so human to see something and want to respond that the computer algorithms know it. They're built on it. The more emotional the story, positive or negative, the more engagement it gets. And engagement means clicks, and clicks means money. And that's what it's all about, right? We've created a digital justice system where accusations spread faster than facts. The very platforms where the advertisements say they connect us have become the most efficient tools for bearing false witness in human history. And that doesn't connect us. It separates us. Have you ever gotten in an argument and perhaps had a falling out with a family member or a close friend over something that was seen on social media? That happens a lot, right? And it's not limited. See, we could say 50 or 100 years ago, perhaps you had to go down the phone tree or talk to 8 people on the party line. Party line reference for those of you who are with that. But today it's very different. As a society, we're broadcasting false witness to hundreds of our friends, enemies, and frenemies, who then broadcast it to thousands of theirs, and it spreads like digital wildfire. Have you ever heard a version of the saying? The saying's probably about 200 years old. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. Have we ever heard that or a version of that? If you search it online, you'll find that it's often attributed to Mark Twain. The thing is, Mark Twain didn't write it. It's often misattributed to Mark Twain because at some point, someone on the internet said that Mark Twain wrote it, and that falsehood took off and spread like wildfire. Think about it. A saying about lies spreading faster than the truth is accompanied about a lie of who said it. And that lie stuck. So let's say that we hear this. And let's say that we want to do better and we don't want to bear false witness and we pledge to stop gossiping. What does it say if we keep building on it? I know when I was first taught this commandment, I was taught that it meant do not lie. Quick, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand. Raise your hand if you've ever heard this commandment taught as do not lie. Pretty much all of us. That's how I first heard it. So if we hear this commandment or we interpret it or we teach it to our kids as being do not lie, then how do we respond when someone we care about says, how do I look in these pants? Going back to my teenage years, WWJD, what would Jesus do? What do you think Jesus would say if you said, Jesus, how do I look in these pants? Would Jesus say what some of us do? Sorry, what? I'm going to go take out the trash. Or would Jesus say, how do you want to look? Or would Jesus just be blunt and say, they fit better 10 years ago? I mean, how do we think God feels about lying? The answer, which might surprise you, is it's kind of a gray area. An easy example is in 1 Samuel. Samuel is called to anoint David as king over Saul, but Saul's still in power. And Samuel's afraid that Saul will kill him when he finds out. So Samuel says, God, what will I do? And God says, lie about it. Don't tell him. Here's an example from the Eugenia Ann Gamble book we've been using throughout the summer. The story is told of a debate between the great rabbis Shammai and Hillel about what words are acceptable to say of a bride. Shammai says, the bride is described as she is. Hillel says, every bride is described as graceful and beautiful. The rabbis judging the debate sided with Hillel. You tell the bride she looks wonderful. A general rule of thumb, for a lie to be justified, it must never be told for the benefit of the liar, but rather always to preserve the life and dignity of one who is more vulnerable. Gamble then continues to make a distinction between a lie, perhaps a white lie, we would call it today, and swearing something that is not true. Because when we swear to something, what we're saying we're doing is we are swearing it before God. Gamble writes, to swear to something that is untrue is always considered morally wrong and a sin. There are no nuances in that teaching. It's especially heinous because to swear an oath brings God into the lie against God's will. It compounds the evil, violating this commandment and the third. So what do we do about the pants question? Here's my personal rule. You can take it or leave it, but I offer it up. If there's something practical to address, a stain, a tear, something that needs fixing, truth serves love in this purpose, and you tell them. But if the question is really about self-worth and belonging, then the deeper truth is what matters. It's not a question of false witness. It's a question of realizing what's being asked. When someone we love asks, how do I look? They're often really asking, do I still matter to you? Am I still worthy of love? And the answer to that question is always yes. You are fantastic. Absolutely. And it's important because how we learn to respond with grace and love in these small, intimate moments, that's practice. That's where it should come easier. Because when we leave home and we go out into a society, a larger world, how can we extend grace to the people who need it the most if we can't do it at home? If we can't do it to the ones we love, how can we give it to the strangers who desperately need it? And this commandment, at its core, going back to the top, it's about grace being a part of how a society enacts justice. A core part of a just society, and that's why I went back earlier in Exodus chapter 23, is it's about protecting those who cannot protect themselves. And as a society, as a world, we regularly forget that. We don't just forget it. Sometimes our structures and institutions are very intentional about who has to face a whole lot of justice and who gets to skirt around it. And if we think justice is applied equally in our world, we're kidding ourselves, and I don't think many of us think that. But what we have here is clear, that God's desire is for a truly just justice system, where regardless of any differences, economic and citizenship status or ethnicity are lined up specifically here, lifted up, but saying that regardless of any differences, the truth is sought. And if the truth cannot be found verifiably, and we know we might make an error, we err on the side of grace, not on the side of punishment. That's where the grace comes in. See, we don't have a cross up on our wall in our sanctuary so we can put someone else up there. We have an empty cross because Christ is risen and our days of sacrificing people on a whim are supposed to be over. The church is called to teach and demonstrate. including by how we live our lives, that all of the Ten Commandments are instructions founded on love and grace. The reason for this summer series, and this is how I'm concluding it because you won't have to hear from me next week, is that the Ten Commandments are too often used as a sledgehammer. They're used to hurt and destroy. But their purpose is actually to be glue with a compass. Glue to help keep people together, and the compass to point towards a better way that we could live in a community with each other. So if we're up for it, here's what I'm asking. Here's a challenge for this week. Whenever we hear a story, a gossip story that perhaps we might think, oh, this is too good not to share, whether it's over coffee or on social media, there are 3 questions we can ask internally ourselves. Did I witness this personally? Is it mine to share? And perhaps most important, does sharing this serve justice or just my own sense of righteousness? And when someone starts to share unverified, damaging gossip with us, we can gently ask, well, that sounds serious. Have you heard from them? Have you reached out to them? Have they had a chance to tell their side? And if we can cut down even a little bit on the unverified information shared online, even if it aligns with our worldview, then we're taking a step towards a more just society. And when we see systems treating people unjustly, when someone gets away with what others would be punished 10 times over for, perhaps we ask, how can our voices protect those who cannot protect themselves? What can I do? What can we do? And the good news is that we don't have to figure this out perfectly because we're not going to solve this today. But we can start to take steps forward, to continue taking steps forward, knowing and testifying that God's grace covers our fumbling attempts at justice, just like it covers everything else we do. Grace abounds. And as we sit here listening to the Ten Commandments thousands of years later, realize that we are still wandering in the wilderness, even if usually it's a digital wilderness. But even there, God is still pointing the way forward with the Holy Spirit compass. God is still giving us Christ and the sacraments to function as glue, wanting to hold us and keep us together. Let us not waste this opportunity. Let us get moving and take a step closer towards the promised land of today and tomorrow. And let's trust that God can use even our imperfect efforts to bend the world towards justice. Amen. Amen.